Hello everyone, I'm back and welcome to part 2 of the 101st Hunger Games. I'm very happy with how my previous video turned out, and I want to thank all of you for your support on my last video. It's very helpful. It makes me happy. Anyways, before I begin, I want to just address one thing, the issue of Andrew Maclaine's art. So I know some of you are creating your own games. What I want to say is, if you are going to use Andrew Maclaine's art, please be sure that you do ask him for permission before you use it. He's a very nice guy, so I'm pretty sure he'll give you permission, but please do ask him for permission, as he wants to see that your writing doesn't contain homophobia or racism or other types of topics he doesn't want to be associated with. Thank you. So now, without further ado, let's go. Meanwhile, Pika had run through the western stands while clutching his sword tightly. Pika looked around and saw Megan, Connor, Naomi, and Typhoon not too far to his right. This appeared to worry Pika, so he continued through the stands until he reached a door, which was only present in the western area of the arena. The door was old, with faint, but still readable, red letters, which spelt out VIP seating. Pika carefully opened the door, but jumped when 7 cannons sounded. Pika then continued through the door and discovered a set of stairs. Pika seemed to think for a bit, before heading through the stairs and up into the VIP seating. From there, Pika gasped, as he was able to see virtually all of the arena and most tributes. Lord commented that Pika was fortunate no other tributes had discovered this spot, or else he would have a hard time fighting them off. As Pika carefully examined the old leather chairs, a cannon sounded. At this time, Loki, Lystar, and Weefy had entered the northern sector, where they were pleased to discover Nursey of 12 hiding. When the gong rang, viewers saw that Nursey had run to the northern door and hidden there, presumably in an attempt to salvage some food after the couriers had left. Loki laughed, as Nursey whimpered and begged the couriers not to kill her. But the couriers simply laughed. Loki then handed Lystar a knife, and told her to do the honors. Lystar grinned, and proceeded to stab the knife into Nursey's skull, which sounded her cannon within a few seconds. After killing Nursey, the courier pack headed up into the stands, where they rested within the upper chairs, while watching the cornucopia. When Nursey's cannon sounded, Typhoon jumped, while Megan pointed out that this cannon likely belonged to a victim of the couriers. Megan then pointed out that she could see Weefy laughing from up in the stands, and suggested that they get a move on and find some food. This seemed to surprise many viewers, and it was later revealed that Megan had a rare vision enhancement from birth, which allowed her to see very far. Naomi and Connor then agreed, and with Typhoon in tow, the quartet headed towards the eastern sector's seating. Upon hearing Nursey's cannon, Pika shuddered in shock, but he continued to examine the seating and carpet, before looking up further into the announcer's box. As viewers in Snow Square gasped, Pika entered the announcer's box and looked at the control panel, along with all the buttons present. The labels under the buttons, however, were dusty and faded, due to decades of erosion. Thus, Pika was unable to read most of the buttons, which led to him leaving the box with many sounds of displeasure in Snow Square. As this was happening, Weefy quickly pointed out Kane, of 3, who had escaped the bloodbath and was now trying to hide himself under a row of seats. Loki noticed this too, and told the girls to be quiet. Loki then climbed over 3 rows of seats, and motioned for the girls to do the same. The girls then followed Loki, as he quickly snuck over to the seats behind which Kane was hiding for. The trio then crouched down, and Loki shot them a look of delight as he heard Kane's breathing gradually slowed down. After about a minute, Loki mouthed that he was going to attempt to kill Khen. Weefy signed back that she wanted the kill, to which Loki replied with a thumbs-up symbol. Loki then slowly climbed over a seat in the row that was hiding Khen, before handing Weefy a knife. After 3 seconds, however, the seat Loki was standing on gave way and broke, causing Loki to shout and Khen to scream. As Loki landed painfully on his left ankle, Khen desperately tried to squeeze free and waved his knife at Loki. However, Loki kicked it away with his left foot, while Weefy jumped and landed beside Khen. Khen then screamed again and tried to crawl away, but before he could get out from under the seats, Weefy had stabbed him in the spine. As Khen screamed even more, Weefy removed the knife and stabbed it through his head, sounding his cannon. Loki then shook his head and casually stated that his ankle would need care, as if nothing had happened. Lystar then jumped over the broken seat and offered to examine Loki's ankle, to which Loki agreed, and within seconds, Loki was sitting on a seat, while Lystar and Weefy examined the sprain. As night fell on the arena, most tributes remained where they were, with only Toasted of 10 and Octavian of 8 roaming the arena, presumably in an effort to locate food. At midnight, the portraits of Khen of 3, the girl from 3, Stella of 5, the boy from 8, Rima and Sassia, both from 9, Lotus from 11, the girl from 11, and Nursey 12 were shown. Oh, typo there. The following morning, most tributes were awoken by a cannon, which belonged to Gasolina of 6. Viewers saw that she had been working with some electrical equipment in the heating room, when she accidentally electrocuted herself severely and caused a small explosion. This seemed to unhinge many tributes, most of which seemed to think Gasolina had been killed by another tribute. As Gasolina's cannon sounded, Loki awoke and immediately reached for his knife. However, upon seeing Lystar chuckling and Weefy still fast asleep, he growled and stated that he was hungry. This awoke Weefy, and Lystar suggested that they go search the eastern area, as she had not seen any action in the stands. Weefy then pointed out Toasted of 10, who was far out in the western sector, but the couriers deemed him not a threat, and thus they decided to head to the western sector. An aerial camera scan done by Lauren showed that Octavian of 8, Nick of 6, and Zascio of 1 were all located in this sector. Lauren then explained that there was indeed food, but that the food was only accessible by entering through the doors at the field, and that no tributes had accessed it yet. As Lauren finished saying this, cameras showed Nick, who had awoken minutes ago, now creeping towards the field, while trying to be silent. Viewers saw Nick quietly and stealthily climbing over many seats, whilst trying to hide from the couriers that were approaching. However, unbeknownst to Nick, Zascio was crouched behind a large scrap piece of metal, just mere meters away. As Nick descended the penultimate row of seats, he suddenly chose to head towards the south, which Ken guessed to be a safer way to descend towards the ground field. Unfortunately for Nick, this was also the direction Zascio was crouched. While Nick headed towards the piece of metal Zascio was hiding behind, Weefy saw him and pointed this out to the other couriers. Loki roared with delight, and decided that he would kill Nick. The trio then ran towards Nick. Upon noticing the couriers were coming towards him, Nick swore and began to run. Cameras then showed Zascio, who was still crouched behind the metal getting ready to leap. However, upon hearing Nick swear, Zascio suddenly froze and hid behind the metal, with his knives at the ready. Within seconds, the careers had caught up to Nick, to the point where they were within 10 meters. Loki then threw a knife, which hit Nick in the shoulder. As Nick shouted in pain, Loki threw a second knife, which hit Nick in the back and saw him collapse to the ground. As Loki approached Nick, Nick begged for mercy, but without hesitation, Loki pulled his spear from his back sheath and stabbed it into his head. As Nick's cannon sounded, the career seemed unaware of the danger Zascio was posing, as he rose from behind the seats. Loki then laughed, and called Nick a weakling for not trying to fight back. But as he finished the sentence, a knife flew through the air and landed in Weefy's head, while another barely missed Loki. Viewers in Snow Square were silent with anticipation, as Zascio had risen from the stands and held a knife in each hand, while aiming the one in his right hand for Weefy and the one in his left hand for Loki. Zascio swore when his knife missed Loki, and he proceeded to gather his remaining knives and jumped over the piece of metal. Zascio then proceeded to run, while Loki cursed at him and picked up his knives. Loki then threw one at Zascio, but Zascio ducked, and the knife flew into a seat instead. Zascio then picked up the knife Loki threw, while Lystar began to run. However, when Weefy's cannon sounded, Loki called Lystar back, and told her that they would kill Zascio when the time came, and that he wanted to make it a very painful death personally. Lystar then agreed, and as the Deathclaw reached in from the ceiling to retrieve Weefy's body, Loki grabbed the knife from her head, and the two ran to the field and jumped down without harm. Lystar then asked if Loki had landed on his ankle right, to which he replied that he had, and the duo entered the eastern door. Pika awoke to the sound of Gasolina's cannon. After a relatively comfortable night's sleep spread out across the VIP chairs, Pika then watched as the careers chased down and killed Nick, as well as the commotion between Zascio. Pika then proceeded to watch Zascio running north and thought out loud that the game makers would probably be pushing the remaining tributes in soon. Pika proceeded to exit the box and ask sponsors for food, but nothing came. He sighed before grabbing his sword and running towards the southern wing, where he seemed to hope stored food. Meanwhile, Typhoon, Connor, and Naomi had been awoken by Megan, who told them that they needed to find food, or else they wouldn't survive long. When Gasolina's cannon sounded, only Typhoon jumped, with the others not reacting much. After a brief discussion, the group saw the deaths of Nick and Weefy while crouched within the stands. The quartet then proceeded to watch as Loki and Lystar entered the eastern doors. At that moment, Connor suggested that as a group, they had the ability to beat just Loki and Lystar in a fight, as they had strength in numbers, but were not unarmed. At first, Typhoon objected, but upon noticing Megan's knives, Typhoon gave in and the trio descended the steps towards the field. Back in the eastern wing, Loki and Lystar were delighted to have found a supply of food. However, the food was behind a window, and thus unreachable. The food was located in a large rectangular container, which was approximately the size of a tribute. The food selection, which contained many bags of different food. Lystar immediately tried smashing it with her spear, but the glass was very sturdy and did not break. Loki then tried to look around for some sort of key, but could not find one. The duo seemed clearly frustrated, until Loki shook the machine so violently that it began to tilt. As the machine began to fall, Loki shouted and tried pushing it back up, but the machine was rather heavy. Eventually, Lystar stepped in, and together the two pushed the machine back against the wall. Lauren explained that in old America, more people died of falling vending machines than shark attacks each year. Loki then pointed down the hall, and was pleased to discover a stand with targets. The duo hastily ran towards them, and Lystar shouted out in joy when she saw that this could be used for target practice, until a cannon sounded. Typhoon, Connor, Naomi, and Megan had been walking across the field when the cannon sounded. As the quartet looked up, they were shocked to see Zascio in the upper stands, after stabbing Octavian 8 of 8 multiple times. Viewers saw how Zascio had snuck up on and killed Octavian without being noticed. Typhoon was clearly revolted and scared, which caused him to try running, but the others pulled him back whilst Naomi told him that they needed to enter the eastern sector first. The quartet then hastily headed towards the eastern doors. Unbeknownst to them, Zascio had seen the four, but deemed it not a smart idea to attack. So instead, he scanned the stands for more tributes and did not move for the rest of the day. Back in the eastern wing, Loki was preparing to aim his knives at a target, while Lystar watched. However, they did not notice or hear the outlier pack entering the eastern wing. Upon seeing the careers, Megan put her hand over Typhoon's mouth, while Loki threw his first knife, which hit the target squarely in the bullseye. Lystar cheered as some coins flew out of a hole in the side of the stand, while Loki roared. At that moment, Megan nodded, and as Naomi and Connor drew their axes, Lystar and Loki finally turned around. Connor's axe flew through the air and landed in the stand's wall, while Naomi's axe barely missed Loki's knee. Loki and Lystar roared in anger, and as the two drew their knives, Typhoon screamed and ran away. Connor then swore, as Loki threw his first knife into Naomi's left lung, while Lystar speared Connor in the stomach. Megan then grabbed her knives and began to run, while Loki grabbed Connor's axe and threw it at her back. The axe missed Megan, and instead landed in the vending machine, with such force that the glass broke. This surprised both Loki and Lystar, and as Megan ran away, Loki decided that they should enjoy some water first, before grabbing a bottle and beginning to drink. Lystar followed, and soon the two were discussing where the other tributes could be, while occasionally looking outside for any tributes. When Octavian's cannon sounded, Pika barely reacted, but instead watched as the outlier quartet entered the eastern wing. When Connor and Naomi's cannon sounded, Pika had also remained still. However, he was distracted by Toasted of 10, who was now climbing into the VIP area. Pika remained very still, and when Toasted had entered the box, Pika slashed his sword through Toasted's neck, sounding his cannon and killing him instantly. Pika gasped in shock at what he had done, and as he wiped blood off his hands, he grabbed Toasted's knife and carefully ran back into the commentator's box, where he rested for the remainder of the day. Viewers in Snow Square seemed bored that there was not enough action, with most tributes remaining where they were for the remainder of the day. However, game maker Blanco told viewers that the fun stuff began the next day. That night, most surviving tributes barely reacted when the portraits of Weefy of 2, Nick and Gasolina, both of 6, Connor and Naomi, both of 7, Octavian of 8, and Toasted of 10 were shown, which left Zascio and Lystar, both of 1, Loki of 2, Typhoon and Octopel, both of 4, Turbo of 5, Megan 10, and Pika of 12 remaining. Before I head into the third date, I just want to apologize if I kill off your character, okay? Because a lot of them die today. As Light entered the arena for the third day, tributes were awoken by an announcement from Game Maker Blanco. Game Maker Blanco congratulated the tributes on reaching the final 8, before stating that a feast would be held at the cornucopia in 10 minutes' time. He then wished that the odds be in the tributes' favor, before ending his announcement. Why is that so? Immediately, Lystar and Loki gathered their weapons, and watched the cornucopia area very carefully from where they were positioned. Meanwhile, Pika had gathered his supplies, and while he seemed reluctant to attend the feast, he seemed clearly thirsty and hungry, so he gathered his sword and knife and headed towards the western door. Upon hearing the announcement, Megan had readied her knives and ran towards the field, where she hid behind a large scrap piece of metal that lay within 20 meters of the cornucopia. Typhoon, however, had run straight towards the field, and as he hid behind a large, box-shaped piece of metal, which unknowingly was just meters away from Megan. As the tributes prepared for the feast, a cannon sounded, which belonged to Octopel of 4. Viewers watched as Octopel thought out loud whether she should go to the feast, but was interrupted when Zashu emerged from behind her and said she wouldn't need to decide, before stabbing her in the head. Zashu proceeded to run towards the cornucopia, where he hid behind a large rock. When the 10-minute timer had expired, a feast table rose from the cornucopia platform, which contained 6 bags. Most tributes deemed it unwise to run towards the platform. However, Typhoon sprinted ahead and narrowly dodged a knife thrown by Lystar, who, with Loki in tow, was now running towards the platform. Typhoon grabbed his bag and tried to sprint away, but unfortunately for him, this happened to be in the direction Turbo of 5 was hiding. As Typhoon ran, Turbo suddenly revealed himself and shot an arrow into Typhoon's leg. Albeit without perfect accuracy, the arrow caused Typhoon to fall and scream, while Loki looked around in shock at who had fired this arrow. Turbo proceeded to reveal himself, and as he shot an arrow at Loki, Megan and Pika simultaneously ran towards the platform. Loki dodged the arrow, but upon noticing the other oncoming tributes, he told Loki to attack Turbo and Megan first. Loki then threw a knife at Turbo, while Lystar threw her spear at Megan. Megan ducked and rolled over, which saw her narrowly avoid the spear. However, Loki's knife hit Turbo in the heart while he was still reloading his bow, which saw Turbo collapse to the ground. During all this, Pika had run towards the platform and had snatched his bag up. Pika ran while dodging Loki's knives. Meanwhile, Lystar had run towards Megan, and as a fight ensued, with both girls wrestling each other to the ground while trying to stab each other. As Loki watched the fight, he ran forwards to help Lystar. However, he did not notice Zashu running up to the platform and grabbing the 4 remaining feast bags. As Zashu ran away, Loki tried to stab Megan, but without success. Megan and Lystar continued to wrestle and shout on the ground, but neither was able to stab the other successfully. Loki then turned around to see Zashu disappearing with the feast bags, but he shouted in rage. But instead of chasing after him, he pulled out his spear and stabbed it through both girls' necks. This caused much surprise in Snow Square, due to Loki abandoning his attempts to save Lystar. Lystar and Megan both tried to scream, but no sound came out. As Loki removed his spear, he was heard to quietly mutter, "Tribute kebab." Meanwhile, Typhoon had not been severely injured, and was fortunate enough to have been ignored by the other tributes. Typhoon then crawled away towards the western exit, but did not seem to have enough strength. Eventually, Typhoon managed to reach the exit, and upon reaching the stairs, he collapsed and looked at his wound. Pika had grabbed his bag and had run through the southern doors, where he climbed the seats until he found a piece of scrap metal big enough to cover him. He then hid under this piece of metal, where he opened his feast bag and was happy to find a sandwich and a bottle of water. Pika consumed half the sandwich and drank half the bottle of water, before putting the remainder in his feast bag. There, he rested, while occasionally poking his head up and looking out for tributes. Zashu had run through the northern doors, where he hastily opened the feast bag for District 5 and drank all the water in the bottle he found inside. He then chucked the bottle and the bag over his shoulder and readied his knives. Within seconds, Zashu heard Loki's footsteps, and once Loki had entered the northern doors, Zashu stabbed Loki in the stomach. Loki roared and thrust his spear at Zashu, but Zashu knocked it to the side, leaving Loki with only a knife in his hand. Loki tried stabbing Zashu. However, Zashu easily dodged the knife, before thrusting his other knife into Loki's heart, thus sounding his cannon. When Loki's cannon sounded, Pika seemed worried. However, he happily realized that he was one of the final 3 tributes remaining. Thus, he seemed prompted to move inwards. However, he chose to remain hidden. Khen guessed that Pika wasn't moving in order not to risk getting caught or found. After massaging his wound, Typhoon had jumped when he heard Loki's cannon, while occasionally looking out for any other tributes. But fortunately for him, no other tributes came near him. After about 10 minutes, Typhoon realized that he had procured a feast bag, which caused many capital citizens to laugh. Typhoon proceeded to open the bag, inside which he found a sandwich and a water bottle. Typhoon laughed and ate the whole sandwich, while drinking half of the water. Afterwards, Typhoon rested, and as night fell, Capital viewers began to grow restless with the oncoming showdown set to happen tomorrow. That night, the arena was known to have dropped to a cold temperature, and as the tributes shivered in the seats, the portraits of Lystar of 1, Loki of 2, Octopel of 4, Turbo of 5, and Megan of 10 were shown, which left just Zashu of 1, Typhoon of 4, and Pika of 12 remaining. I'm sorry if I killed you off. It was noticed that when Megan's portrait was shown, Typhoon looked away and appeared to mutter something, but this was not captured by the microphones, and thus unnoticed. The following day, tributes were awoken by a loud squeaking sound coming from the perimeter. As the tributes looked towards the perimeter, multiple mischiefs of rats were seen to have been released. These rats charged inwards, and were designed by the game makers not to enter the main field, but to draw the tributes towards the main field. Upon seeing the rats, Pika immediately gathered his sword and knife, while draining the rest of his water bottle in one gulp. Pika then slid his knife in his pocket and held his water bottle and sword at the ready, while running towards the cornucopia. Okay, it's recording. Typhoon had spent the night in the doorway of the western exit, which led to him immediately gathering his supplies and running to the cornucopia. Once there, he climbed on top of the cornucopia, where he lay hidden. Typhoon was the first to reach the cornucopia, and thus managed to climb unseen. Unfortunately for Typhoon, he did not have a weapon other than the arrow that had hit his leg. When Zascio had awoken, he immediately heard the rats. Zascio grabbed his knives and sprinted to the cornucopia. Once at the cornucopia, he did not notice Pika, but instead focused on looking at the cornucopia itself. Pika, however, spotted Zascio, and immediately ran and hid behind the other side of the cornucopia. Typhoon had heard Pika approaching, so he lay very still. After a few seconds of silence, Typhoon suddenly jumped onto Pika, which made both boys scream and shout very loudly. Zascio grinned upon hearing this noise and quickly ran over to where Typhoon was fighting Pika. Typhoon tried repeatedly stabbing Pika with his arrow, while Pika pushed away Typhoon's hand. After a while of fighting, Pika reached up and snapped Typhoon's arrow in half. Typhoon screamed as Pika slashed his sword across his neck. A cannon then sounded, and Zascio congratulated Pika on a well-fought fight. Pika looked up and swore when he saw Zascio a few meters away, laughing. Once Zascio stopped laughing, Pika pulled out his knife and threw it at Zascio. However, Zascio easily deflected it, causing it to land on the ground a few meters away. Pika swore and raised his sword, while Zascio readied his knives. The boys then looked at each other for a few seconds, before Zascio said that there was no way Pika would win, as he was from an outlier district. Pika replied that he would at least try, and as he finished the sentence, he pounced towards Zascio. Zascio seemed caught off guard, and only dodged at the last second. Pika then jumped towards Zascio again, slashing his sword at Zascio. But Zascio headbutted Pika's legs, which saw both boys fall to the ground. Pika held tightly onto his sword, and put on a surprisingly strong fight. Pika tried to slash Zascio many times, but missed each time, while Zascio tried to stab Pika. Missed each time, while Zascio tried to stab Pika was pushed away every time. Wait, what? Sorry for the typo. Eventually, Pika managed to get the upper hand, and slashed Zascio lightly across the chest. As Zascio lay bleeding, Pika tried to climb up, but Zascio stood up, which caught Pika off guard and tackled Pika, before stabbing him in the head multiple times. This saw much surprise ripple through Snow Square, and as a hasty hovercraft flew into the arena, it was announced that Zascio Throne of District 1 was the victor of the 101st Hunger Games. Zascio was immediately rushed to Gull Hospital, where he received urgent treatment for his wounded chest. After 2 hours, medics at the hospital announced to the public that he was in good recovering condition, and that he would be available for the victor's interview. During this time, Zascio was known as Panem's Child, and proved to be a very popular victor, with admission rates to his victor's interview surging to a capital high. He was commended for fighting bravely on his own, and for his impressive display of strength throughout the games. For his victor's interview, Zascio was dressed in a fine scarlet suit, adorned with white diamonds and blue sapphires. Zascio was warmly welcomed to the stage by Lauren amidst deafening applause from the audience and many cheers. Zascio immediately complimented Lauren's dress, which made Lauren smile and thank Zascio. Zascio then kissed Lauren's hand and sat down on the palm chair. Lauren began the interview by asking about Zascio's strategy during the games, which Zascio stated mostly consisted of waiting for the right opportunity to strike, and rationing his supply of knives. Lauren then asked some questions about Zascio's opponents, most notably Pika and Loki. During this, Zashiu remained humble and commended his opponents for putting up a brave fight, while stating that he respected bravery and courage. Once the applause had died down, Lauren proceeded to ask Zashiu what he would do with the victor's rewards he had earned. Zashiu replied that he would be spending the money on improving training centers in District 1, as well as improving his own life back in District 1. This caused many cheers from the audience, and on a high note, Lauren concluded the interview. After Zashiu returned to District 1, he spent most of his earnings on improving the Kobayashi Training Center. Zashiu implemented a variety of changes, which included better equipment and more space for training. Zashiu was known around District 1 for being a popular and kind victor, who often accepted visitors to his house in the victor's village. 5 years after achieving victory, Zashiu married Benocia Malone, and the pair eventually had a baby the following year. Zashiu was also known to have been an excellent mentor, with him interacting with tributes very nicely. And that concludes my first ever Tales of the Hunger Games YouTube write and upload. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'm very proud of how well it turned out. I really do appreciate all the kind comments that I received and all the offers to help me proofread. Obviously, I cannot accept all the offers to proofread, but I do want to thank you all for offering. I also do appreciate the kind comments, as they really do make my day. Furthermore, if you would like to have a tribute named after you in the 103rd games, please send me a DM on Discord. My Discord tag is down in the description. I'm not going to guarantee you're going to have your name put in, but only the first 3 people to DM me will get their name in the 103rd games. So yeah, that's it. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments or on Discord or on Twitter. I'm happy to answer them. And I know I might have killed your favorite character off, or I might have killed you off, and I'm sorry, but I promise this won't be the end of your character. There will always be more to this. And lastly, I also want to say to all people who are thinking about creating their own games, I just want to say that do it, because it will turn out better than you think it will be. Just like my first games. I did not think it would be as good as it was, but yet it still turned out to be pretty decent. So do it. Have faith in yourself and have confidence, and be proud of what you make and be happy with what you create. Anyways, that concludes it, and I'll be hopefully releasing the 102nd games sometime soon. And spoiler alert, there's going to be Sheaf content and, well, Rebellion content. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions, comments, please let me know below. Tell me how I could improve my games as well. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you everyone for listening to this.